Hello, and welcome to Regrets I've Had a Few. I'm Paul Hunter, Artistic Director of Told by an Idiot, and this is a podcast where I talk to friends and colleagues delving into what made them the person they are today. Hello, and welcome. My guest this month has acting in her blood, but she has always ploughed her own particular furrow. Part of the extraordinary collective that was Kneehigh Theatre, she worked with them on and off for over 20 years. She was also recently starred in two astonishing feature films, where her work on screen has been rightly lauded. Welcome, Mary Woodvine.
Thank you very much.
It's really...
Makes me want to cry, actually.
No, I don't wish to upset you. No, all of those things
Great
are
start.
true. All of those things I've said are true, which is good. Now, I often, when I talk on my podcast to guests who are from a performing background, or I often ask how it all started, but I'm assuming you literally were born in a trunk at the side of the stage.
Not quite, although I took my son when he was 5 months old and took him in a trunk at the side of the stage. I think that was the last Kneehigh show I did. I took my son then, and he was 5 months old. No, I wasn't, but it meant, I think, because both my parents were actors, they'd met at the Bristol Old Vic doing Midsummer Night's Dream. And Dad
Perfect. What were they playing?
Well, Dad was playing one of the lovers and Mum was playing a fairy.
Excellent. Perfect.
But I think because of that, I think it was just one of those things that, because somebody asked me how I got into it the other day, and I think it was just always an option. Whereas I think for lots of people, they don't necessarily think of it. I mean, I think they do more now, but certainly, yeah, when I was growing up, that it just kind of wasn't an option for lots of people. It wasn't something they thought, oh, I know, I'll be an actor. But because it was just sort of my world,
Normal.
really. It was just normal, and we didn't really have extended family. We just had hundreds of, actor friends and Mum's divorced actor girlfriends, and it was just like, yeah, lovely.
I'm always slightly fascinated. Obviously, not just you. I have friends who like you are children of actors, and I always, I suppose, in a sense, you mentioned about your own son being in a trunk, and now my kids are very comfortable and just used to being in a rehearsal room or on a set because they've grown up with it. But I suppose that sense of when both of your parents do it, it's not just like, because my partner's a psychotherapist, so it's not like we're both actors. Whereas both of your parents did it, and then that was just the norm, I suppose. But did you go and visit if your dad was filming somewhere? Did you go and visit on set, or did you go to rehearsals, or was it just a separate thing and that's what they did?
I think it was quite a separate thing. Mum didn't work so much when we were little.
Yeah.
She'd stopped working. She'd been working at the establishment when she got pregnant with my sister. So with Peter Cook and Dudley Moore and
Wow!
Bird and Fortune. And
she was performing with that gang?
Yeah, she was performing with that gang and then got pregnant with my sister. So then she left, and then Helena Braun got the job that she had. And
oh my word!
She's always gone like, She was always a little bit.
Wow, that's proper showbiz kind of cool end of showbiz royalty, that is.
Yeah, it is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, but she didn't work quite so much, and then ended up getting, working in a school and being a school secretary and doing things like that. And then she trained to be a counsellor, interestingly enough. But Dad, I often talk about Dad just not being around very much, because we saw him on Sundays because there wasn't a show on Sundays. I'd sometimes come home, I'd see him after I came home from school before he went to the theatre. He'd sometimes be on his hands and knees cleaning the kitchen floor. Good memory I've got of my dad in his pants, interestingly enough.
Well, it can be. It can be hot work, I think. Manual.
Well, I think it was
manual labour.
Yeah, but I think it was so he didn't get his trousers dirty while he was kneeling on the floor.
I think to give him due, and also an actor with as prestigious as your dad, that's a strange image for me, because I think of him in Shakespeare and Eugene O'Neill being brilliant, by the way. But I suppose my other question around that is, did you have any moments, because it was so normal and it was, as you say, an option, did you have moments when you were younger where
you kind of reacted against that? That I'm not going to go into the family business, so to speak.
No, I didn't. My sister
Okay.
did, but I didn't. I just thought, oh well, this is what I'm going to do. And I wasn't very academic, and I didn't do very well at school. And it seemed to be the one thing that people kind of went, oh, well, you're not bad at that. So I thought, oh well, this is just going to be it, and I don't have to write either, because yes, as I said, not brilliantly academic.
So you did school plays
It
and
just seemed,
things?
yeah. Did the school plays, and then joined youth theatres, and then I did the National Youth.
Wow.
Then I did an OA in drama. When I don't know the
What's
first
OA?
an OA, I think, is equivalent to an S level. I think it's literally in between
Oh,
GCSE now and an A level. It was sort of an in-betweeny one. I did that, and then I tried to get into drama school and did it 2 years running. Didn't get in the first year, but did the National Youth Theatre, which was just amazing. Yeah,
and
so
then was the National Youth Theatre your kind of training in a sense then?
No, but I think then, like today, it just gives you a really good grounding in terms of, it's got such a brilliant reputation, and it did then. I was doing that with Daniel Craig and a guy
Wow.
called Jonathan Cake, and I got my first job because the director who worked on my second year piece was a guy called Bill Buffery, who then took on the directorship of a theatre company in Devon.
Ah.
So I finished drama school, did some temping work, and saw that he'd taken over this directorship of this company called Orchard.
Yes, I know Orchard. Yes, of course I do. Yeah,
Yeah, so
long-term company in Devon. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wrote to him, sent him a postcard just saying, oh, I understand you've taken this on, and please consider me if there's anything suitable for casting. And that's how I got my first job. So that was all through having done the National Youth Theatre.
I have to rewind slightly here. So your mother was hanging out with
Yeah.
Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, and you with the future James Bond. It's very, very...
It sounds incredibly glamorous, doesn't it?
What was it like?
Oh, it was lovely.
Yeah, yeah.
It was absolutely lovely. But we were all like 19 was this, yeah, probably 17, 18 or 19, late teens anyway.
So great time to be in a company and doing plays. And
oh, it was, and that was the first time that I really knew what it was like, because it was that kind of immersive 2 weeks, or maybe 1 or 2 weeks, really intense, getting to know a group really well and working on something, and suddenly that was it. Like loads of people get, I do lots of theatre now where there's a community element, and they use people from the community to add to the productions, and you just see them fall in love with it and absolutely get lost in it, and you go, oh, I remember.
Yeah, I remember that feeling. You mentioned drama school. Did you go to Welsh College? Is that right?
I did go to Welsh College, yeah.
And how was that?
It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. I didn't go home. Everybody else, it was sort of like, it was lots of, I made fantastic friends. I'm ashamed to say that I didn't know anybody spoke the Welsh language, which I was really appalled by myself, and I was considered myself, I'd been to a good comprehensive school. I considered myself to be quite worldly, and had no idea that it was like a proper people's first language. So it was brilliant, but sort of like halfway through the term, people were going home, and I just didn't go back. I just stayed. I loved it. It was fantastic.
So
I lived with some lovely people.
Oh, brilliant. And we're kind of contemporary. So what would this be? Kind of late 80s or early 90s?
Yeah, late 80s. So I was there. Well, no, mid 80s. Went in 86.
Yes, I went to Middlesex in 86. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's weird because when I kind of, we'll come to this shortly, obviously, in Kneehigh. We both, you more so than me, but we've both obviously been part of that extraordinary thing. But I kind of, in my head, I thought, oh, I bet Mary went to Dartington. I don't know why. Ooh. My brain had that kind of vibe, but you were at a classical drama school training, Mary.
I was. And I was very, very lucky as well, because it was a college of music and drama. I got a scholarship, and I had singing lessons for a year, for the 3 years.
Oh,
so
brilliant.
I learned proper singing, which was really confusing. because I'd always sung. We'd always sung. And this sounds like the absolute epitome of coming from an acting family. But mum's friends would come round with a guitar, we'd all sit and sing and harmonise, and so I'd sung all my life, and then suddenly to learn the kind of technique to sing in inverted commas properly, I literally couldn't sing for a while. It was the sort of the relearning process.
Wow.
When I just couldn't sing, couldn't remember how to do it. It was really odd, and then you just let the technique take you back to where you were. So
and of course you then go through that, and you talk about working in with Orchard. Was that what first took you to that part of the world, sort of Devon and Cornwall? Because you're not from Cornwall, are you?
No, I'm not from Cornwall, but I was very lucky, and I, from the age of 6, came to Cornwall for every single holiday.
Okay, so
half
you knew it
term,
well.
6 weeks every summer.
Okay.
So I knew it really well anyway. Then I got my first job in Devon, and then there used to be something called the Southwest Theatre Consortium, and it just meant, like now, that everybody in the local companies, everybody supports one another, everybody goes to see what everybody else is doing. And so because I was doing working with Orchard, Mike Shepherd, who was the founder member of Kneehigh, came to watch this Orchard show, and then that was it, really. Just got to know everybody, and then I worked with Tristan with the second production. So the first production I did with them was Carol Churchill's Fen, which was quite heavy going, if anybody knows it. It's an amazing play, obviously, but every village hall it was bigger than village halls. It was sort of small scale touring. Everywhere we'd go, people would go, "Oh, we liked it when you did Lorna Doone," or The Woman in Black. But we sort of turned up with Fen, which is pretty
and also
dark.
I mean, it's an extraordinary play, but I can imagine people going, "Oh yes, I'd rather Lorna Doone than this slightly abstract, challenging sort of."
Somebody being stuck in a wardrobe, and oh god, it was just like horrific. It was it's an amazing play, but it was very funny, people's reactions to it. And so then I worked with Tristan Sturrock. The next thing we did, I think, was I might have done a Christmas show. We did Beauty and the Beast, and then the third show was Midsummer Night's Dream, and Tristan Sturrock was in that. And Tris was obviously a massive Kneehigh member, and Tris and I knew each other from when we were teenagers, because he was doing something in London, I can't remember what it was, and needed somewhere to stay, and his mum was a friend of my mum's, so we met when we were teenagers because he stayed at my house,
and then reconnected as actors,
and then reconnected. And then when I'd done the Christmas show, I'd met Giles King, who's then Tris's best mate, and then Giles and I got together as a result of that. And in fact, Tristan was our best man when we got
married. He? Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, more Kneehigh shortly, but it's interesting that you talk about your first encounter with them, because I remember my first encounter, which was obviously later, but was, I think, something like 97 or 98. They were doing a Nick Dark play called The Riot at the National Theatre. You weren't?
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I should have remembered that, shouldn't I? I should have gone. You were absolutely marvellous, Mary. If you want to storm out of the podcast, feel free. Anyway, I auditioned for Mike for that, and I got a recall, and then I didn't get it. And I always enjoy ribbing Mike over the years that he didn't want me initially. I had to keep begging to get into Kneehigh, but I remember then, must have been a couple of years later, and they were doing the Red Shoes. Emma was directing the Red Shoes. And I think someone, they'd done it once briefly, and a Portuguese performer didn't do it.
Luis.
That's it, Luis. And they said, rang me up and said, would I be interested? And I thought, well, I do like the sound of this Kneehigh. And of course, when someone says no to you, you like them even more, don't you? So
absolutely.
So they said, why don't you come down and meet me and Emma? And I'd never been south of Bristol before. I had no idea. And I got on I was from Birmingham, and then I lived in London. And I thought, where am I going? This feels like the Wild West. The train went on forever. I was like, and then Mike picked me up at St. Austell, and I didn't know them. And we drove to the Amazing Barns. I should explain for listeners, are these extraordinary in Gorenhaven, the barns where Kneehigh used to make all their work. And we met there, we spoke, and then Emma and Mike said, "Oh, come on, we'll go to the pub." And we walked around the back of the barns, and for them it was, everyday thing. And there was the ocean, and I must have stood like some kid who'd never seen the sea. Look, and they went, "You're right." I said, "Yeah, I've just been rehearsing my a car park in Westbourne Grove." So that environment, which you were obviously used to in your summer holidays, for me was astonishing that people could make work in that place.
Yeah.
And then once you kind of hooked into that, and obviously was that something where you thought, "I'm just part of this now, this world of Kneehigh"? Was that where you kind of, I know it's hard to say because there's so many loose ensemble-y type members of people, but I remember meeting you with Giles in that time as well, and you were around. But did you just kind of slip into that world, or?
Yeah, it was. I look back and I just think how lucky and amazing that time was, because I was also really, really lucky. I had actually already had an agent in London, so I'd literally like live in a van, me and Giles, up at the barns, because so it's like 3 or 4 barns all joined together, which at the time some bits had horse tack and a horse in it, and so we only had a couple of them, but as the company grew we sort of took over more, and it was all rented from the National Trust. And we just sort of lived there. There's a car park, so we kind of lived in a van. Tris lived in a van. We all ate together. But then every now and then I just like get a call from my agent and jump on the train and go off and do a telly or something like that. And then just
disappear.
We're talking about the mid-90s, so it was quite a lot of good, it's television, and I was in my, early 20s. So,
you were with James Bond again, weren't you?
Oh yes, yeah, and
Our Friends
in the North.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was great doing that. It's a long way to Newcastle from Cornwall. But yeah, just so lucky. And in fact, my current partner, rather, it makes it sound a bit temporary, doesn't it?
For the moment, we'll come to him in a minute, just in case he disappears before I get to talk about it.
But he says things like, he said to me not long ago, we were talking about something, he said, "What about the Stone Roses?" And I said, "I don't know. I just don't know who the Stone Roses are. I kind of think I do, but I never really knew their music." And he was like, "What? Oh," he said, "were you living in a caravan made of theatre?"
Were you with the theatre troupe at the time?
I was living in a caravan made of theatre. That was it. And that was it. We listened to folk music. As the 90s wore on, we did get a bit housey and clubby, but the early part, certainly when I first met Giles in 90, Christmas 90, the early part, we just sort of listened to folk music and world music, and we didn't know anything about, I didn't know anything about the Stone Roses or Blur or Pulp or anybody like that. I didn't have a clue. Well, give me Planksty any day.
Yes, exactly. Well, it's actually, you mentioned Mark Jenkin, your partner, and it does bring me to these two astonishing films, and I'm sure you've been inundated with people wanting to talk to you about them, and they are extraordinary. I just had 2 quotes I really liked, which I wanted to kick off and maybe talk a little bit about Bait first. If anyone obviously hasn't seen this film, I'm sure lots of people have, but it is an extraordinary film, written and directed by Mark Jenkin. But the thing that's
developed
and everything, God, exactly,
and edited.
Yeah, that's what I think is extraordinary. Sorry, it's almost like Charlie Chaplin. Everything, music. It's astonishing. But 2 quotes I really liked. One, obviously, you've heard these probably, but there's a big supporter of Mark and the film was the critic Mark Commode, who brilliantly supported it, I assume, right from the get-go. That's the feeling I get when I read about it. And he talked about it being a genuine modern masterpiece, which establishes Jenkin as one of the most arresting and intriguing British filmmakers of his generation. And then Peter Bradshaw, the critic in The Guardian, this is the way I like it, Bait is like an episode of EastEnders directed by F.W. Murnau, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. And it's in some ways, it's a very, very good description of the film.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know him very well and his process very well, but reading about it, this was years in the planning and preparation and the making through the short films and all of that. And I just was curious when that sense, I suppose that sense of being around somebody, like you talked about your parents, but being around someone that has that level of endurance, to keep something going. There must have been times when you thought, am I going to get this film made? Or what was it like being around someone that was pursuing something so single-mindedly like
That's his character. I mean, that's what he does. He just pursues things single-mindedly.
that? Until it happened.
And it is amazing to sort of to watch. And when I first met him, I was aware that I was sort of in the company of somebody who absolutely kind of committed 100% and kept working. And we were just having a chat yesterday about, I was saying, are you content? And he was saying, yeah, we're both talking about just what we want out of life. And he said, well, yeah, but I wouldn't mind an Oscar. And I was like, are you joking? And he said, no. And it's like, he's really, and I think, and he decided at a very, very young age that he was going to achieve things. And I have to say, I didn't. I don't even, I'm not even that ambitious either. So it's brilliant to be with somebody who is that driven and that single-minded, because it does completely, and sometimes it's a pain in the arse, obviously, but sometimes, but most of the time it's incredible.
I'm sure it is.
Brilliant.
And in your role in Bait, I was interested, did you was that always something that you were going to play, or did Mark look at other actors and then arrive at you, or how did that work?
Not for Bait. For Bait, I think I was always, that was always going to be me. Although, he'd been writing it for years and years and years. It came in very many forms, and I think I can't remember with that, the draft that we actually shot might have been like draft 30 or something. He'd written it so many times, or maybe even 40. He'd written it, and it had loads of different names, and it was like 10, 15 years in the making, or even I can't remember. He'll hate me for misquoting.
No.
But then with Ennis Main, he said I couldn't play the main volunteer, and he needed a woman that was in her late 40s, early 50s. I kept sort of waving at him across the breakfast table. Hello. And he said, no, it can't be you. And I was just like, for fuck's sake. So then I ended up sort of helping him cast and go, well, how about so and so?
You're kidding me, really?
No. And suggesting people that I thought would be a really brilliant for the job. And then he had a meeting with the producer one day, not long before, probably 6 months before we started filming, and said, oh yeah, and Denzel and I have had a chat, so and I think you can play the volunteer. So there was like no fanfare, no sort of, it was like, I think it's okay if you do it. I was like, and then I spoke to Denzel, and he was just like, no, it was only ever going to be you. Of course it was only going to be you. But I think Mark was really concerned about nepotism, so he was a bit worried about casting me because of nepotism. But then, touch wood, so far, I think there was one comment a couple of weeks ago about something about it, but I don't think many people have kind of.
No, I'm sure they don't. And
it doesn't really matter.
I mean, it's interesting because, of course, I was aware and was reading about amongst many influences, the influence of Nick Rogue on Mark's work, and I was reading him, interestingly, talking about being a kid and studying the book Walkabout and then being shown the film. And I took my family, to see Walkabout last Sunday. It was showing at the Riverside Studios, and I'm a big Nick Rogue fan, and I hadn't seen that film at the cinema ever. And I said, as a half-term treat, I said, right, come on, we're going to go and watch Walkabout. And my kids are fairly cine literate. I have to sometimes badger my son Dexter to watch something that, he thinks something is old when it was made last year. So sometimes I have to really insist. I said, no, you'll like this. And then we sat down, and it is an extraordinary film. I haven't seen it for years. And I think they were really blown away by it. I think they hadn't really seen anything like it. And they did really, really engage with it. It wasn't like they were going, but they were like, whoa, what is this? What is this thing that they're... And I suppose obviously, because I didn't want to read too much about Ernest Mann, but I read bits. But you can see that influence, of course you can, whilst at the same time being wholly original. But my question, I suppose, was, when I read about Walkabout, Edward Bond's script apparently was like 17 pages long. How long was the script? Given obviously dialogue-wise, it's very minimal.
It's very little dialogue. 64.
Oh, okay, so very
pages,
detailed script.
I think so. Yeah. And but obviously a huge amount of repetition. She walks across the cliff. She picks up a stone. She drops a stone. I mean, that, like, every page it's got that on it. She writes in the diary, so a huge amount of repetition, and very sparse. But I mean, it kind of made the the scenes when I've actually got somebody there. The lovely Edward Rowe, who plays the fisher, the boatman. That's so brilliant to actually have somebody to share a scene with, because it's a really odd thing, kind of feeling like you're doing nothing, and people sort of say, oh God, I thought that was great, and I go, but I literally don't do anything. I literally walk across a cliff and drop a stone, and so
I know
it's quite a strange thing. I suppose you have to be conscious, but you don't want to be too self-conscious. And it is really that thing. I suppose it was good for me as a theatre actor, doing something that was so intensely kind of sort of filmic and cinematic, to really learn that craft of not telegraphing anything, literally just thinking the thought. Because with Kneehigh and work, doing a show at Minack, which is the brilliant theatre on the cliffs in Cornwall, or any outdoor theatre, where you have to telegraph everything in huge physicality. So that is my kind of default. So
that makes it
all the way back.
Well, it makes it even more astonishing, Mary, because it is an amazing performance, and that the kind of, as you say, the containment of it, but the simplicity of it, and it's very hypnotic. It's very strange when you watch it, because you're kind of, and of course it doesn't reveal itself very easily.
No.
And it's dealing with big things, grief and loneliness, but you can't take your eyes off you and the kind of environment, and you in that environment, because it's not just, in some ways we share a background in theatre and similar, Told by an Idiot, our work is very theatrical as well. But I often think, for me, what I love about performing is playing with other people. People say,
exactly.
I made a show last year, and the assumption, because it was quite personal to me, it was about my football team and it was about me. The assumption from the producers were, oh, this will be cheap. It's just Paul on his own. And I went, no, there's 3 other people in it. And they were like, oh God, this was supposed to be just you. It was, And I said, I've got no desire to be on my own. I like being with. Whereas in this, you were fundamentally, for large chunks of your time, as a performer on your own. And I think you. Well, I don't know. You've explained it, but I thought it was astonishing. You seemed so in that place where it was so credible. And
I think it's interesting, because that's something that I've managed to talk to people about during Q&As. That I think, I suppose, in the way that when you're with other performers, you're reacting to what they're saying and what they're doing, and the what they're kind of showing you're reacting to. I had the natural world to just sort of react to and be in, and also, I know this sounds a bit, that I was just being present, and also I think it helped that I am a physical person. So walking on cliffs is really simple for me, or pleasurable and easy. I don't worry about losing my footing, so I think that maybe that kind of came across as well, that there was an ease physically, as opposed to I don't know, and and I was just sort of reacting to the environment, as opposed to.
I think that's true in a sense, because that's partly what I mean by credible. You looked so comfortable in the environment. You know, I bought you as this volunteer.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I went, okay,
Great.
I buy this person here, and I know that maybe sounds a kind of simple thing, but it's quite important in a sense to be able to go, okay, I'm not going, oh, maybe she will slip over there. She looked very good on the right. All
Yeah,
of that is
exactly.
taken for granted. But I read a thing that Mark said as well, which struck a chord to me when he said, I love films that foreground the fact that you are watching film. And I know what he means. And actually, for us as Told by an Idiot, that's kind of what we do with our theatre. We are always acknowledging the artifice of theatre, that by its very nature, and it's what Kneehigh did. And I think that's kind of what the film does about cinema in a sense. And I'm when he said that, I hadn't thought about it. I thought, oh, that's yes, I kind of see what you mean, and it makes me enjoy it more. Weirdly,
yeah, absolutely.
Now, sorry, go ahead.
No. Well, no. What he talked about sort of the dream state and cinema was invented. You know, Mark talks about this on Q&As as well. That telling people your dreams is about the most boring thing you can do. You can wake up in the morning and go, oh God, I had this amazing dream, and then it just does. It's for the person listening, never quite does it? Because dreams are about atmospheres, because you kind of have an atmosphere of a dream, don't you? And with film, you can create that. You can make those atmospheres to tell those stories so that people understand that and kind of feel it. Whereas if you just tell it as a story, you don't. So it's kind of, film has the capability of creating dreamlike states for people to experience.
I totally agree, and actually partly because Chaplin's very much on our mind, because our current show is about Charlie Chaplin, Stan Laurel. But I remember Chaplin was asked why does the little tramp never speak, and he said, because the little tramp exists as if in a dream, and in dreams people don't talk. And I thought that was a really good way of looking again at the notion of this figure, that even when all the talkies and sound was coming in, he was going, no, and there's a purity, I suppose, about almost like the purest sense of film being without words in a way, the image and the. Now, please tell me the phone is ringing off the hook with offers for you to do more film work, Mary.
Of course it isn't.
Oh, I don't.
This is the world we live in. I've done one low budget feature.
But the film was seen at Cannes. Did you get to go to Cannes?
Oh yes.
Come on, tell me about Cannes.
Oh my God, it was so exciting.
Was it cool? Did you got the carpet?
We did have a carpet, but of course we were in one of the smaller cinemas and nobody really knew what was going on. So
it still can, Mary. It still can.
Having said that, we did arrive when everybody was already in the theatre, so possibly they were all waiting for us to arrive.
Exactly.
But we arrived late. But we'd had a bit of a drama getting there because we'd gone on the train. We didn't want to fly, so we'd gone on the train, and as the train was coming out of the tunnel in front on the French side, there was this amazing electric storm. And further up the track, this lightning hit the track, so everything just sort of stopped. So then we didn't know. Anyway, basically, very, very long story short, we couldn't get to Cannes on the night that we were meant to. We had to spend a night in Paris, which obviously was very lovely, but a little bit stressful. I don't think Mark slept very much.
And how did the festival deal with it then, when she couldn't get?
They were fine, no, because we were going to arrive the day before the film was on. So what we just did, we had to get up at it was about 4:45, get a train, change at Marseille, get another train that got us to Cannes, and then we were met by all our lovely sort of, the entourage.
Yes.
And they took us to our hotel and stood in the lobby and said, right, we'll see you back here in an hour. So we literally had an hour
to just change your clothes,
sort of unpack, jump in the shower, get ready, and then put our frocks on and head out. Yeah.
And it
was brilliant.
What was the reaction like at the end?
It was great. I mean, Cannes very strange because people just get up and leave.
Yeah.
And they've got flip seats so you can hear them.
Oh, that's even worse.
It's not like people slip out silently. No, you just get a flip out. But thankfully it wasn't quite like that. So we got introduced and we had to walk down through this full auditorium, several hundred people,
Ah.
go to the front of the stage. Mark introduced the film, introduced me, and then sat back down, and we just sat there kind of gripping each other's hands for the whole of the length of the film. It was absolutely excruciating. We heard a few chairs flip, but not too many. And then we got up on the stage afterwards and did a Q&A, and everybody seemed to really like it.
Oh,
I mean,
brilliant.
it's very strange, though. It is really,
It's really
really
weird. People
strange.
say, "Oh, where would you mentioned Mark and the Oscar or whatever." I've always wanted to be in a film that went to Cannes more than anything else. I don't know why. Whenever I read about it when it's on in May, and my old colleague and co-founder Hayley was in a film by an Italian director called Matteo Gironi, a film called Tale of Tales, and she went to Cannes with that, and she bought me a little fridge magnet from the Cannes Film Festival, which is as close as I've got so far. But now chatting to you, I'm even more determined, and maybe I need to have the determination Mark has to get me to Cannes. But
Yeah, just believe.
Exactly, just believe. That's very good. That's a very good point. And just before we finish, Mary, it's been so lovely, and I can't believe we've not really chatted that much, really. We've crossed paths.
No, over the
And
years,
over the years, we've
yeah.
never been in the same show, but this is the beginning of us chatting as well, which is nice.
Good,
and I'm sure
yes.
I'll be down in Cornwall at some point. But I
hope
always
so.
finish by asking some rapid questions, and you give your first answer. Number one: to be surprised or know in advance?
This is meant to be a rapid answer. That was a surprising question, wasn't it? I'll be surprised.
Surfing or sailing?
Oh,
You can say
surfing.
neither.
Yeah, no, I like surfing. I just don't do it. I'm frightened of sea monsters.
Glenda Jackson or Vanessa Redgrave?
Glenda.
Party on the beach or rave in a field?
Party on the beach.
The Northern Lights or the Australian outback?
Northern Lights.
The Wicker Man or The Exorcist?
Or Wicker Man.
Film or theatre? Let's leave that in the air. Do you want?
I don't know.
That's good. I don't know.
Theatre,
it's a very good place to end, Mary. It's a ludicrous question anyway. But thank you so much for joining us. You've been brilliant. And
total pleasure.
As I said, hope to see you somewhere soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dear listeners, if you've enjoyed this idiot podcast, please spread the word